share. All right, so we are now, just want to make sure everyone is aware, we are now live on YouTube. And just give me a moment, and I'm going to begin the recording process on this computer, and then I'm going to turn it over to our committee chair, Dan Knapp. So give me one moment. Okay, Dan, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Yeah, thanks a lot, Justin. Appreciate it. Man, what a time for us to get through another year, another semester with soccer. Got to see a lot of different games this year, and I believe that that soccer and the IQ of soccer is increasing in the state. That's a tribute to ADs hiring good soccer coaches, and just philosophies across the board. And it's really, from a soccer guy myself, even though we don't have men's soccer here yet, it's really fun to see. It's great to see the talent and the level of soccer getting better in this area of the country, and specifically to Colorado. So thanks for all you guys do. Want to call the meeting to order. Whitney, does it look like we have everybody? I lost your thumbs up.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, we've heard from everyone. If they're not here, they are just gonna be joining us a little bit late. So yep, we're good to go.
Okay. I want to take this time to thank Justin and Whitney for their leadership at CHSAA. They do a remarkable job of coordinating the different sports that they're in charge of, but in particular soccer. I've been through a couple people at CHSAA, and I think Jason or Justin knocks it out of the park. So I was saying Jason because I was gonna say welcome to our guest Jason Hampton with HSSO, and Sean Stediford with CHSAA Soccer President. Appreciate you guys being here. You guys are welcome. And so with that, let's get on with our committee meeting. I'll take a few minutes, review the 2020-2021 soccer committee minutes that Justin sent out. And if you haven't already, I'm just going to give a couple minutes for you guys to look over those minutes. Whitney, thank you for sending those out ahead of time so we could get our eyes on those ahead of time. Can I get a motion to approve the 2020-2021 soccer committee minutes?
Dan, I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mike.
I second.
Was that Gordon?
Kevin.
Thank you. All right. Are there any additions to this year's committee meeting, to our agenda today? Is there anything that anybody wants to discuss that's not on the agenda? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to be talking about. Our meeting today, I expect to go a hair over 2 hours, and we'll try and keep things going for you. But we do have a lot to discuss today. So with that, we'll turn it over to Jason Hampton, who's representing us today for officials, to give us the officials report. Thanks, Jason, for being here.
Thank you. As far as
So I'm filling in for Ken, obviously, right? Ken here, president for the high school soccer officials. Unfortunately, couldn't step in today, but wanted me to pass along some information. Generally, overall, how we felt with the past technically 3 seasons, the 2 in the spring, the revised COVID seasons, C&D, and then this fall. Everything we felt, went pretty well. No major issues this last fall from the spring season, COVID season. Numbers of officials were just about the same. We have just under 300. I think we're technically sitting at 297 statewide that are members with us. Now, some of those are going to be maybe honorary members, maybe non-active officials technically, or they're going to only be a single season. So maybe it's a college student who will referee outside their playing season type of thing. So number-wise, obviously, we are significantly down from previous years when we were well over the 300, 330, 350. So it's still a significant drop. And generally across all sports, I think that's kind of going to be expected to continue into the following years. For this last boys season, I think we had fewer issues than during the spring COVID season, just across the boys. So going through the winter and into the girls, we're kind of expecting the same. Everything went well with the finals. I think everyone on HSSO side was excited with the use of Widener Field for the finals in the spring and then last fall. A little more intimate venue. All the officials kind of felt that it was more a better environment than maybe say Dick's. Dick's is just a little too large. Not necessarily just the field wise, but the venue, so it's not quite the same atmosphere. In the spring, all the finals were great turnout. This last fall, they were great too. We didn't have any big things to report during those games. I think all the crews for the finals did well. And this last fall, the semifinals, no big issues that I know of either with those championship games. I don't have much else to report unless there's any questions from the committee.
Yeah, unless Dan, do you want to go first? But I think I have a question, Jason, for you. What as far I know, you talked about the drop in number of officials. How did HSS do as an association on covering? I mean, how many games would you say went uncovered without even one official lower level game this season?
There was definitely a lot of sub-varsities, whether they were freshmen, sophomore games, C-level, whatever you want to call them. If anything, they would have only had one official at the most, right? Very rarely would we have 2 officials on a freshman or sophomore game. And that's just going to be one based on the day of the week that those are held. If they are ever held on a Tuesday, Thursday, those are probably going to have 0 coverage. I think what we need to do too as a membership is getting more officials to not be so hard stanced on their own Tuesday, Thursday like they have in the past, right? Availability of officials tends to be more on those 2 days, Tuesdays and Thursdays, just because that's historically what the sport has been. But with more games being pushed to Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, these last couple of seasons, we've had better overall coverage, especially on the varsity and onto the JV games. Personally, myself, I never had a JV game that had just a single official. but I know that there were quite a few throughout the fall season, even with JV games with a single ref. I do not personally know of any varsity games that went single ref, not even having two, but I was involved in a handful of two whistle varsity games throughout the season, just based on the number of games that were on a day and not having enough coverage. Percentage wise, it's going to be relatively low, but I would say that's still significant.
Yeah. And I think, Jason, that's kind of where, and, we tried, Dan, you and I spoke, and we spoke with Ken about that, the program that we're still in the works trying to start. It was proved to be a little bit more difficult than we anticipated, starting the program with some of our high school kids, officiating some of those lower level games. But I think that's ultimately where we want to get to, where the program that Ken and CHSAA has worked on to get kids registered and get them on some of the lower level games, even at their own schools, to make sure that we have those games moving forward covered. And I think we are excited to hopefully roll that out in the spring, now that we have some time between seasons to get that going and start in the spring for girls season. So hopefully that'll help us on some of those lower level contests where you're seeing one official or none.
Jason, when we were a couple years ago, when we went from the 3 whistle system to the 1 whistle system, one of the goals in that was to become united more with the club official philosophy, and getting away from where we thought as a membership soccer was going, which turned out to be the wrong direction. But by going to the single whistle system, the idea was to attract more club officials to CHSAA competition. And do we have a way to track those club officials onboarding with our CHSAA games? And I'm surprised. I guess I was hoping to see less of a demand for officials in the area, in the state.
So retention rate from, say, even the last calendar year when we did the reduced fee membership, reduced cost membership, there was over 90 people out of our previous roster of 323 that did not renew for one reason or another. About 10 of those probably moved out of the state. The others are just kind of winding down their careers, etc. But this year, yes, with our new membership additions, everyone has a tie either to U.S. Soccer, the youth side, club side, or even college. The number of college officials that we have brought into the state that have either moved here or were already here, and we are getting them to join into high school. That was a big part of it. It was their refusal to participate in the 3 whistle system, especially if they came from the college side. So yeah, we do have a large number of college referees coming in, and the nice thing about the youth soccer is that's where they're also getting their training for the U.S. club. So for our membership, that's one of our requirements, is that they are already currently registered through U.S. Soccer. They've gone through their training. They get their on-field training. So they'll have a background in that before they even come into high school. So it won't be quite the shock of someone who came in and then all of a sudden was thrown into the 3 whistle system. So
yeah. So is it safe to say, I also understand that a lot of those officials we lost just because of mask restrictions and such through COVID, but
there was a few.
I imagine that we would have lost. It could have been a lot dire situation for us as far as officials had we not moved to the single official system. You think that's accurate?
Yeah, I it's not very soccer. Well, okay. It's a system that was even test trialed by NCAA, right? So they're the ones who originally came up with this idea. It was brought into NCAA first and swiftly rejected. So I think that kind of gives you an idea of it. It leads to much more variances in games, whether the consistency that coaches are always striving to have from a single individual, that was probably more prevalent in the three whistle system. Now you're still going to have those same issues in any game, whether it's an offside decision that is maybe made incorrectly. If a flag goes up and the referee, trusting their partner, goes ahead and blows the whistle, that could have very well been an error. The foul decisions, obviously, if a flag comes up and the referee is going to support the assistant, okay, maybe the referee doesn't feel, and honestly, it's a foul, but the assistant does, but we're still supporting our team member. So I think going back to the single whistle and two assistants is helping with our numbers, with our retention. Personally, as the treasurer and seeing how our numbers have gone the past few years, I was not expecting us to have just under 300 this year. I was looking more into probably the 250. But we have had over 30 plus new people join this season that have some higher level of either high school experience or college experience for sure, that have moved into the state or joined.
Thank you.
Dan, I would say, having looked at the numbers across all sports for officials, that soccer, obviously there's, labor shortage across many industries, and we're not immune to that with our officials, but Jason and Ken and HSSO has done an amazing job. I'll be honest, while the numbers are down, soccer is done far better than most in retaining and bringing in new officials. So I just want to make sure that we do point out the amazing work that HSSO has done in making sure that the majority, if not all, of our games are covered throughout the year with high quality and good officials. So
Yeah, I'll second that. So thanks, Jason. Pass on our gratitude for trying to keep as many officials around as possible. We're doing what we can with managing yellow card, red card, fan behavior stuff on our end to make it more enjoyable experience for everybody. And that's our goal. That's our mission. So appreciate all you do and your part in that. Really do. With nothing else there, we'll move on to the Coaches Association report. Sean Stedford, welcome.
Thank you. Everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. Good morning. Thank you, Jason. From a coach's standpoint, I think the officials crushed it this year. I know we had some hiccups along the way, but overall, the coaches I spoke to, it was a home run from you guys. So awesome job. A lot of the stuff that we want to talk about from the coaches committee or the coaches association is in the action items, but just to review a couple things. First off, all state this year, with a different process that we went through from trying to merge the two different teams into one, was a gigantic success from a participation standpoint. We do want to acknowledge that there are some hiccups and some bumps that we'll need to iron out and work out along the way. But I mean, to have over 300 players nominated shows that the coaches spoke up and kind of got on board with this process. I think there's some things to work out, like I said, along the way, but getting that many nominations from the wide variety of leagues in all four classifications was hugely successful. And let's see, turning that into what the all-state game will look like, we're going to have to work through that and kind of look at where the membership goes. But membership overall is up. Just kind of sounds like it was in the officials piece. It is for the coaches as well. We have over 160 coaches registered through CHSAA. That's both boys and girls. We obviously want that number to grow and get some more of our lower level team coaches involved. So JV, C team, how do we get those coaches? Another piece that we want to work on in membership is how do we get new coaches? There's a lot of high school coaches in our state that are sort of torn as to which association they need to be a member of, whether it's United Soccer Coaches, whether it's CHSAA. So trying to get those two things to exist in the same space is proving a challenge, but we're excited that our membership is growing. And looking at some of the major talking points from our stuff, and I know, again, some of these are action items, but taking away the coaches poll was not a big hit in our meeting that we discussed, but it sounds like the seating committee will add a human component to how the state tournament works out. So I think listening to more information about that later in the meeting is going to be key for us from the coaches side of things, because we don't want to lose the human component connection of how our teams get seated in the brackets. Let's see, we're Mercy Rule. We acknowledge as a coaching association that the Mercy Rule needs changed, but we are a little divided on what those changes are going to look like. So interesting to hear, again, in the action items of how we're going to kind of work through that. Game minimums. This was a big piece in our meeting. There are coaches that strongly feel that teams purposely sort of manipulate their games in order to pump up their RPI and their max preps rankings. So we would like to see game minimums introduced in all 4 classifications, not just in 2A. Out-of-state opponents. I know Justin and I talked a little bit offline about this, but what can we be consistent with the schools that decide to play states that are schools that are not in Colorado? And it's understood that neighboring states, and Justin, correct me if I'm saying this correctly, neighboring states to Colorado carry the same RPI percentages as opponents in our state. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, it's no different than playing a team in Colorado. Obviously, we have many schools in Colorado that border Utah or Kansas or Nebraska, Wyoming, and New Mexico, and they need to play games against those states, and so they are tracked, counted, and ranked no different than a team within our state. So,
Thank you. Is somebody going to add something to that? Okay. Another thing that came up from our meeting was Sunday contact, acknowledging that this is not the meeting to bring that up, but just that it is a concern of the Coaches Association for those coaches that do coach club, that it's as more and more tournaments and things get crammed into the weekends, it is potentially conflicting for a lot of our coaches. So just that's on the radar. Again, acknowledging that this is not the meeting for that to be discussed. Yellow card accumulation. When the committee meeting notes were sent out, there were some coaches that are in favor of this, but they question where the accountability is going to come from, who reports it, who keeps track. And there's really right now, there's no incentive for a player to not play recklessly from a lot of coaches. So they would like to see something put in place to change that behavior.
Yeah, we were just talking about that beforehand. Also, just how do you get a kid that had multiple red cards still competing in the rest of the season? Where's that accountability come from? So yeah, that's something to discuss for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then there were some coaches along the same line about the cards. Is there going to be a different penalty for the different severity of a red card or a yellow card? Sometimes a red card can be a dog so red, which is not malicious, but it happens. From a personal standpoint, my team had 2 of them in back-to-back games in the spring. But just how do we differentiate for those players that, hey, it's not my intention, but it happens. So again, I know that's an action item. And then lastly, a couple things. There is some concern about how the seasons are arranged on the calendar. A lot of coaches on the girls' side feel that spring break is not factored into the length of the seasons. So for example, the boys would have 11 weeks with some schools taking a fall break, some schools not taking a fall break to play their full 15 games. And if you were to plug spring break into that spring season, it really gives the girls 9 weeks to play the same amount of games. So there's some concern on the girls' side of the membership of how do we make the seasons more equitable, taking into account that every school takes a spring break and some take 2-week spring breaks during that time. So those are the major action items from the Coaches Association. Again, membership is up. A lot of the stuff that came up is in the action items to be discussed. So open it up for any questions, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk.
No, Sean, I wanted to just thank you. I know that, you'd mentioned kind of in your opening there that we have changed the all-state process and how that looks. And you and I met multiple times, over the summer and discussing kind of what that would look like. And obviously in the past, we had two separate all-state teams, the CHSAA and the CHSAA All-State. And obviously we wanted to just, avoid that confusion and really just have one all-state team and have it be the CHSAA all-state team, but supported and run through the Coaches Association, which I think obviously the coaches know the players better than anyone. And obviously, as you mentioned, it was, the first time we had done it. So there was some kinks to work out and a little bit of growing pains there. But I think at the end, we got the right kids on the team. We got the coaches' input, which was important. And I just want to thank you for all your work in helping to get that done. And I think moving forward, it'll only get better. But I think we've now got a process for determining and awarding our student athletes with the all-state team for boys and girls soccer, which is going to look great moving forward. So thank you on that work. And then everything else you mentioned, I think we're going to talk about here in the action item. So.
Yep, I'll second that, Sean. Thank you that membership increase is nice. And just that overall, just the coaches being more intentional and engaged that's good for the sport. Again, going back to what I started this meeting with, we're getting a lot more coaches engaged, and just goes to the philosophy and the IQ and soccer in general, just being better across the state. So losing my articulation there, but you know what I'm saying. So well done. All right, moving on, 7.0. Justin, why don't you take over the action items there?
Appreciate it, Dan.
Start with the yellow cards. Yep.
All right, thank you. So, all right, this is kind of where the committee, you guys are going to earn your money here. The action items, we discussed them. I think it was extremely important for us to get this information out to not only the committee, but the membership as a whole as early as possible, so that not only could the committee do their research, but the membership could reach out to our committee members, and hopefully that happened to sort of get their opinion, and so that we can speak about each one of these action items with a little bit of information. So this is where we need the committee to give their feedback. This should be a group discussion as we move forward and sort of discussing where we're at with each one of these action items. And so just, I mentioned it, I believe in our opening before we went live, but we do have one addition to our agenda with the action items, which is 7.8, which is seeding the bracket. So we discussed that as a committee before we went live with the live stream. So I just want to make sure everyone watching on YouTube is aware. We do have one addition to the agenda, which is 7.8. They're seeding the bracket. So let's start out with 7.1, and I'm going to bring up the yellow card accumulation spreadsheet that everybody should have gotten on this committee. Let me just bring that up. As you can see, we've taken out all of the names, so there's no issues there. So let me just kind of go over some of the numbers and explain sort of why we started this process with collecting some of this data. So if the committee members that were part of the committee, I believe it was last year or 2 years ago, where I think it was our last in-person meetings, where we discussed sort of what some of these numbers actually would look like. And I think some of the committee members had some concerns on, we punish a student who gets a red card, they have to sit out a game. But what happens to that kid? Perhaps, I think there was some question, well, do we have kids, and what would happen to that kid that, as an example, maybe gets one yellow card in every game, gets 15 yellow cards for a season, and has no punishment, whereas a kid could get one red card in one game, he has to sit out, or she. And so we went through those numbers. And obviously we didn't collect this data last year because it wouldn't have been accurate because of the shortened seasons with COVID, and we had so many games canceled. The length of the season was not as long. So we waited until this fall where we were back to a more normal season to get this data and then present it to you as a committee for next steps. And so going over the data, hopefully you all have had a chance to look at it. Whitney and I went through all of this with Tom Robinson, our officials liaison, yesterday. And let me just give everybody some of the numbers. So we had 1,457 player yellow cards throughout this season. And now you're hearing that number and you might think, wow, that is a lot of yellow cards. But keep in mind, that is across all classifications, all levels. I would say that in the state of Colorado, in a season, I don't have the exact number, but we have over 1,000 games played. So you're really talking about a small number of yellow cards when looked at with a whole number of games being played. We had, let me go to the red cards. We had 217 player red cards. Okay. A little bit more, obviously we want that number to be 0. But again, across all classifications, across all levels, the number really is not terribly significant. We had 136 coach yellow cards and 18 coach red cards. I think one piece of important information and data that we did pull that looking back at the minutes from 2019, it seemed like the committee was most concerned about that player that was maybe accumulating multiple yellows throughout a season and got no punishment. And in our data, we had one player in the entire state that had the most yellow cards any one player got was 6. That was the most, and that was one player. We had 4 players receive 5 players receive 5 yellow cards, and then 4, 3, 2, and 1. So we didn't see that concern that the committee had where there was maybe a number of players accumulating all these yellow cards without punishment. 6 was the most. We had only 5. So really, we're talking about 6 players that had 5 or more yellow cards, nobody with more than 6, and then kind of trickled down from there. One point I also wanted to bring up, Dan brought up the red cards earlier. Remember, we do have in our bylaw a way to handle those red cards. 1 red card, you would sit out 1 game. 2, you would sit out 2. You get a 3rd red card, you are now subject to a penalty to be determined by CHSAA. So just wanted to be that we do have something in place that does say how we handle red cards, and we do have a number, a strong number, 1, 2, and then 3 that kind of puts you into a point where you are now your punishment is now decided by CHSAA. So those are the numbers, and I'll open it up for discussion.
Could we not go to something like college? I know in the college game, I'm not sure it's the same, played a long while ago, but 5 yellow cards equals a 1-game suspension. Now, I think they play up to 20 games, college, 18 or 20 games. So maybe 4 yellow cards and you get a 1-game suspension, and then another yellow card after that, or 2 equals another game, something along those lines. I mean, when I read the thing, like, it's interpretation. I mean, tactical foul. I mean, Fountain Valley got a tactical foul. That kid played 5 minutes. He doesn't know what a tactical foul is. He probably tripped over his laces and the kid fell over. It probably was a yellow card, not disputing that. But I mean, you know, this interpretation. I mean, I'm reading here, you know, foul and abusive language. I get that. You got serious foul play. Then you got, I don't know what USB is. What does that stand for?
Oh,
I think it's unsporting behavior.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that's one way. I mean, there's I don't think any coach is going to, you know, some coaches might say 6 games, some might say 3, but, you know, you find a happy medium of a certain amount of, you know, 1 player, 4 yellow cards equals a 1-game suspension, something along those lines.
Yeah, we discussed that last year in our committee meeting a little bit and talked about who would be tracking it? Like, where does that fall? And kind of stepped away from it for those reasons. But yeah, I would like to see that. Some sort of accountability for yellow cards. But like Justin was saying, there's one kid that accrued six yellow cards. It's not an abundance like we thought. Well, what actually we were scared to see, we're not seeing. So where one kid is accumulating, multiple kids receiving 6 yellow cards, that's just not what we're seeing. So, cost reward, is it worth putting somebody to track all the yellow cards to hold this accountable? We kind of stepped away from that. So give you a little bit of background there.
Yeah, and I will also say, again, it is a tremendous amount of work to collect this data, a lot of work from officials, and Jason, you can step in here. I mean, for the officials now to have to go in and report yellow cards, it's a lot. It was a lot of additional work for them, and it was a lot of additional work for us to collect this data. I'm not sure if the data, I'm not sure if one kid over 5 supports all that additional work that goes into getting those yellow cards. But again, that's for the committee to decide. The other thing, and I can tell you that we've proposed a change. I wrote a change to the NFHS rules. NFHS meets on that, I believe, in January, and they'll decide. But soccer gives out yellow cards differently than a lot of other sports handle and hand out their punishment. So, I mean, you can look through the list. I mean, we've got kids that received yellow cards, I mean, for wearing a necklace. And so just the way that soccer, handles their punishment is a little bit different. And so there's, you have officials that might a tactical foul, as you mentioned, Kevin, might be yellow for some, it might not be for others. And so I'm not sure right now, without some proper training with HSSO and the officials to get a little bit more consistent. I don't know if we're ready, and there's really a need for an accumulation penalty with yellows just based on the data. But again, that's up for the committee to decide.
What other sport? I'm going to just say this as a athletic director as well as a high school basketball official. We're not, if we give multiple technicals in a game, right? They're not being tracked. We're not sitting kids out. So I guess just from that different perspective, Justin, I think you said it of, the officials have to use judgment as far as how can we walk and talk through these situations. And if the training could be different, because we're not tracking them in basketball, just as an example. And kids aren't getting kicked out of, or losing a game if they get multiple technical fouls in a basketball game. Different game, I get that, I understand that. But I just think we have to look at it from that lens too as well.
Agreed. And I will say the only 2 other sports that we have that track and have an accumulation penalty for yellow cards are girls lacrosse and field hockey. And I oversee both of those sports. I don't know where the data came from. They were the penalty came in place before I got to CHSAA. So I'm not sure what the data was to bring about the committees in those sports deciding to implement a penalty for an accumulation of yellow cards. But I can tell you that in the 3 years that I've been at CHSAA, we have not had one student athlete get to the number that they have for a penalty. So they have a penalty in place. We have not ever had to actually suspend somebody. So that'll be a talking point probably moving forward in those sports, whether or not we even need that to continue. So that's just some information for you guys. I think, Ty, you were asking, do we do it anywhere else? Girls lacrosse, field hockey, only 2 sports that have that tracking. And we've not suspended anybody for the penalty since I've been at CHSAA.
Justin?
Yes.
First of all, apologize for being late.
No problem at all.
I got hung up, but I just wanted to put out there that I did hear from a number of 4A, 5A schools that were definitely not in favor of the accumulating and keeping track, and as we've been talking. So I just wanted to make sure that I put that out there.
Yep. Thank you.
Justin,
Any-
from the coach's standpoint, it was the idea that like my kid could get one every single game. That was what they were coming from.
And
Like, how
that's,
do we eliminate
yeah,
that?
no, for sure, Sean. And that's what prompted the committee in 2019 asking us to track this data. There was that fear, and we didn't know. Obviously, I mean, you say it, you got a kid could get one every game, and we go, wow, that we don't want that. And obviously, when we actually, track the data, we aren't anywhere close to that, to those kind of numbers. We had, again, less than 50% of the games somebody was accumulating a card. I don't have that. I'm not looking at that particular athlete that got to 6 and what all of them were for. But again, you could get one for anything, like jewelry could be a yellow. So there was the fear, and I'm sure the coaches had the fear. Hey, is somebody getting one every game? And we're not close to that. But that was the concern. And that's why we started.
There is a way coaches can keep themselves accountable. Max Preps does have a red card, yellow card button when you input your stats for games. Just for clarity purposes, there is an ability to do it. But I will say, and just credit back to Jason and the referees there, I saw a lot of times where a discussion was taking place before the card was branded. So I think the referees are doing a better job of being more, I don't want to use the word lenient, but they're talking through more situations, which I think is helping.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, Jason, do you have I'd like to get Jason's thoughts on this from the Officials Association. Do you have any thoughts on yellow card accumulation? Do you have any thought on what is the feedback on officials on having to submit the report? Is there any talk about, what's the talk with officials on consistency with their yellows? Anything that you guys want to add?
From our side, as far as reporting goes, we are doing our best to make sure all our membership knows about reporting. So it's on our website with a quick link directly to the CHSAA report form to make it convenient and easy. Finding it on the new CHSAA website compared to the legacy site is obviously a lot easier too. The report is very simple, so it's not so much a difficulty there. There's probably still a few officials who, one, just don't do it because they are not interested in reporting anything post-game. But our letters to our membership and our communication to our membership is always, at minimum, it has to be the red cards. For this season, we would want everybody reporting all cards, though, so that we get this data, this info. Oh, this one player maybe who has the 6, did they have a 7th that was not unreported? I'm not sure. I wouldn't be able to tell you. What I can tell you, my feeling is all the other levels of soccer, whether it's international, FIFA, and it's a major tournament, right? There's some type of accumulation penalty. As we come down to youth soccer and club in the state, Colorado Soccer Association does have some form of a punishment for accumulation. Also for theirs, NCAA, it is 5 yellow cards and you have to sit 1 game. If you receive up to your 8th yellow card, so 6th, 7th, and 8th, then you have to sit in 1 additional game. And then after that, it's every 2. So a 9th yellow card, a 10th yellow card would be another game suspension. Yes, most colleges play somewhere in the 20 game range, maybe up to 22 if they make it into NCAA tournaments, things like that. I do know of a few local players in Division II who hit the 8 yellow card mark in the RMAC. So it is something that I think that if there is an accumulation penalty for CHSAA, we would be in support of it. And it's on our duty to make sure that, you know, officials are reporting. And yes, there will have to be some self-policing, obviously, whether it's the schools have to verify against the yellow cards that are issued. Because of the National Federation rules, though, regarding maybe jewelry being a yellow card, to the coach, a second jewelry would be a yellow card to a player, right? And so the rules there for National Federation High School are putting some of the onus on the coach there and not just the players. But yes, a player picking up a yellow card for jewelry. And obviously there's some officials that maybe will turn a blind eye a little bit to that, because does it earn me anything carding a coach if a player happened to, you know, accidentally forget to take off the earrings or their necklace or whatever? So in other levels, you know, there is no punishment. Hey, the player steps off the field, they simply correct it, and we move on with the game. Now, if they don't correct it, that's when the punishment comes in. So that's just a National Federation issue. Consistency amongst all officials, yes, obviously we hear that. A difference in a tactical foul, whether my interpretation of a tactical stopping a promising attack may be slightly different than another individual, another ref. If there was an accumulation penalty, obviously the number should be relatively high. So if you saw one kid with 6 and you said you saw 5 players with 5 throughout the season, maybe 5's not a bad starting point. It could be 6, it could be 7, and then you serve a 1 game. If you're picking up a yellow card in 50% of your games, that might be something to think about. So if we're back to playing a 15-game season, maybe it's the accumulation starts at 7, maybe it starts at 8, just so that it's something's on the books, so that coaches maybe feel okay, the committee feels okay, that there is not going to be something excessive happening. We would support that.
Any other thoughts from anyone else on the committee? So I will say that I've gotten some people watching live stream. I've gotten some texts, some emails. So our plan is to continue to track through the girls' season, just so that we have a full year of data to see. I've seen some people make some suggestions on, you know, what about an accumulation for the team as opposed to an individual player? Some things to consider. But again, maybe this is something that we need to continue the data to show the committee again next year, but to sort of explain why we had this in the first place was because there were committee members that were concerned that players were racking up individually large numbers of cards. I don't think we've seen that, but we'll continue to track the data, share it, and then we can even break it down into, you know, numbers of players, number of cards per team, show you that data at the end of the year, and then maybe try to get, I will say, Jason mentioned, there's some players that are probably not reported. I would say based on we get those reports every day. I would say 100%, almost 99% chance that yes, we have some unreported yellow cards, because I can tell you that we've had red cards, or usually we either hear from like the coach or the administrator, hey, I had a red card yesterday or last week and I haven't gotten a letter. And typically it's because always because we did not receive a game report. So based on the number of red cards that we tracked down this year, I would say there are definitely some yellow cards that were not reported as well. So there's going to be some work with the officials on that to try to make sure that we do get those game reports after every game. But our plan is to continue this data throughout the girls' season as well. So I guess if there's no further discussion, Dan, I can turn it over to you and see if we want to come up with any kind of a motion to come up with any sort of a penalty for yellows.
Let me unmute myself. Yeah, I think it's a good discussion. I don't think that if there's anybody that wants to put a motion out there for any proposal, I kind of know there's everybody. Thank you. Yeah, and open the floor for further discussion, or we can move on and not make any motion? All right, Justin.
Okay, so let me bring back up, and again, we will continue to track this throughout the girls' season. We'll get that information to the committee.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
we wanted to get
Yep.
a full year, guys and girls.
Yep, yep. And Sean, I know you had mentioned some things from the Coaches Association. Maybe if the Coaches Association wants to come up with a number that they feel like makes sense, that we can actually present to the committee after collecting a full year of data, that might be helpful as well.
Can I just ask, just for clarity purposes, the coaching side of it? Did coaches' cards increase, decrease? You don't have to show it. I'm just curious.
Well, it's different. Those numbers are difficult because again, last year we played fewer games.
Right.
Far more were canceled. So obviously they went up from last year. From 2019, the number was pretty consistent.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it was like a plus or minus. I don't have it in that tab in front of me right now, but I think it was like plus or minus 4 was literally the difference between reds. And 18, I think we had 18 red cards for coaches. Not a tremendous amount by any means. So I was actually pleased that was one number that I saw that was actually, you know, you want it to be 0, but you're talking about a very small percent. All right. So obviously we had no motion to move forward anything on yellow card accumulation. We will obviously work closely with Sean and the Coaches Association to maybe get a proposal after we see some additional numbers. Sean, if you or Coaches Association wants to see some of these breakdowns, I can certainly sit down with you as well and provide you with some of that info, and we can try to come up with something a little bit more firm after getting those girls' numbers to present maybe next year that shows some of that, an actual number on what that would look like. But again, the committee wanted to see if individual kids were accumulating large numbers of cards, and we didn't see that. So, all right, mercy rule. So let me just kind of discuss first the way the current mercy rule looks, and this came from we got this, quite a few coaches, some leagues came to us asking about the mercy rule. We actually, in our field hockey meeting last week, changed the mercy rule for some of the same reasons that we're looking at this one. So currently, the mercy rule is you reach the mercy rule at 7 goals. And at 7 goals, the clock begins to run. Once you've reached the 8th goal, you now remove a player from the field and you are playing with 10. When a team has reached a 9-goal differential, another player comes off the field. So you are now playing with 9 players. And then once a 10-goal differential is reached, you would then end the game after the conclusion of the first half. So obviously you have to get through one half of play. Once you've played one half, then you would then end the game with a 10-goal differential. And so there's been some discussion. I'd like to hear from the committee. I know that currently we are one of very few states that actually do remove players from the field as part of the mercy rule. We in the field hockey meeting, we decided to not remove players from the field. The reason behind that was that the coaches and the Coaches Association felt that it was their job to sort of educate coaches on sort of sporting behavior and use obviously games that are a little bit one-sided, where the differential reaches where you get into the mercy rule, as an opportunity to bring on some players maybe that do not get the chance to participate at that level. And so as you start taking players off, it's kind of counterproductive, where you're trying to get some people more experience, but now you're having to remove players at the same time, and it becomes difficult. And so that's sort of the discussion here. Do we want to remove players off the field? Is the number too high? So some of those things. So I'll let the committee speak.
I mean, me personally, as the coach, you can see the difference after about 20 minutes. So I put in the lesser players. We don't have a JV team here because we don't have enough numbers. So I put in the lesser players. So, you know, it still kind of runs that score up. I don't like doing it, but you know, telling the players to not do something can also be deemed disrespectful, but then you have to start taking those players off after they've only got in and get little time when you play those lesser teams. So I don't know what the number is for the goals, but as far as taking players out, I'd rather keep in the 11v11 kind of system. Whether you play to 10 or whether it's less, I don't know, but I don't like taking kids off if I don't have to, because by that time I've already put in what I would class my lesser players.
Sean, is that the feedback that you got from the Coaches Association? What does the Coaches Association feel about removing players?
Not in favor. So for the same couple reasons that Kevin just talked about, but also when we're covering so much space in a soccer field, and I know some schools play on smaller fields, other schools play on bigger fields, but now you're asking the players on the field to cover more space, and now you're kind of stretching them. And some coaches feel like that's more of a punishment than it is for a benefit for the other team. So I think, again, you have to put it back on us as coaches to manage that situation. But most coaches are not in favor of removing kids. They would like to keep it 11v11, whatever the numbers are, and manage the minutes and the time from there, right? And if we're going to continue the conversation in that regard, like some leagues they want to keep the scoring the same, like the game ends at 10, but that's where we're sort of divided, where I talked about earlier. I think everyone acknowledges the mercy rule does need some changing from the coach's standpoint, but I don't know. I think 10 is too many to keep it at there. But if you stretch it a little bit, maybe the game ends at 8. But then some schools say, when the game's 8-0, we're still playing. So they feel like there's some benefit there too. So again, this coach association is kind of divided. Yes, we need to change the mercy rule. Not really united on how we do that, but we do.
Right, and I will say that field hockey and soccer, I think they're the only two sports that we had that were removing players from the field. And so field hockey last week decided against that. There was no change to the actual number of the mercy rule. The mercy rule itself stayed the same. The only change was that we would no longer remove players from the field. So that would now leave soccer as the only sport removing players.
Justin, did the first half still have to be completed for field hockey?
So the field hockey mercy rule, there is no game end. So the way field hockey is played is a little bit different. The clock is running anyways, except for, with like a timeout or an injury or goal. So I guess similar to soccer, but the game would not end in field hockey. So you could continue to accumulate goals. That's always been the way the mercy rules worked in field hockey. The game, regardless of the score, would continue to play. Field hockey did not have, it's a little bit unique. The number of goals that are scored aren't quite the same as a sport like soccer. So you don't have a game end because you don't see 12, 13, 14, 0 scores in field hockey. So there is no end with field hockey, whereas we do with 10 goals in soccer. And that, we could discuss that too for all.
Yeah. Any further discussion on this? Any chats coming up on YouTube?
I think what I've heard the most, Dan, the feedback that I've got is that coaches and leagues would like to see the players not come off the field. There's not been any consistency. I'd say that probably the most I've heard would be just leave the number 7, 8, 9 game ends at 10 the same. What I did hear was in some of our discussions was that some teams are traveling quite a bit of distance, and so if the game ends at 8 or 7 or whatever it might be, that's just less game time or opportunity for players to get onto the field if you're ending it earlier. I don't think there's any real consistency with the number, but where we did see the consistency was, as Sean mentioned, was we don't want to see players coming off the field. So the proposal that we would have, that we would need a motion on, would be to run the clock at 7, end the game at 10, not bring players off the field at any point, and that would be what we would be looking for.
And Justin, that was the point I was trying to make, and you just said it like it was the travel piece of like a team's not going to travel 2.5 hours and after 7 or 8 goals, it's over. They would rather continue to play.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, we could down the road discuss, do we even need to end the game? But I think, again, as far as consistency, everybody was in favor of leaving players, the 11 players on the field. And Sean, would you say, as a coach, because that's the big thing that came out of the field hockey committee meeting and the coaches association, was that they will do a better job in their training with coaches to explain, like, listen, we need to make sure that we're not running scores up, we're not embarrassing teams. We did see some scores this year that were quite high, I'll be honest with you. And so as the coaches association, we would ask you now, if we're going to make that change to the mercy rule, that the coaches association is working with their members to say, listen, here's how we expect you to, conduct your games once you reach that 7-goal differential, or once you reach this goal differential, in making substitutions and making sure that we're not, embarrassing anybody. Because again, we are, we're all Colorado, and we want to make sure that the sportsmanship is a priority, and that nobody leaves feeling like they've been embarrassed.
Yeah, I think that's something we could certainly tackle from a coaching standpoint. And I'd be curious, with Kevin's feedback here as well. But, sometimes you see those 13, 14, 15-0 games, and no, it does not reflect well in the community. But at the same time, it's hard because the kid who scores the 13th goal, that might be the only goal they score all season. And, you potentially, are you taking away that moment from a kid? Yes, we want to have the discussion about not running up the score, but also at the same time, like, have to acknowledge that when the games are at that point, you have kids that maybe have never experienced that before. So
I'd also have a situation where a team only brought 7 or 8 and is trying to avoid a forfeit, but is completely outmatched at that point. And so there's not much you can do, like you said, Sean.
So we would
let's get
go ahead, Dan.
sorry, if there's a proposal that we can have further discussion specifically to the proposal, let's hear that now.
Yeah, the proposal on the table would be 7 goals, run the
Yeah.
clock, end the game at 10. Players would not come off the
Okay.
field.
Yep. So let's discuss specifically that proposal.
I think the game does have to end. I don't think we could pull it off like field hockey does. The game,
I would
think the
agree.
games are longer. And then if it doesn't end, then you're running the risk of kind of what we just discussed, a team having no choice. You can't play keep away for 25, 30 minutes. It's not fun.
I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Any other discussion? All right. Does anybody want to make a motion on this? We just read it one more time, Justin?
Yeah, so it would be mercy rule would kick in, same as it does now, 7 goals. 7 goals, the clock would run. At 10 goals, the game would end. Once the first half has been complete, a 10-goal differential has been reached, the game would end, and you would stay with 11 players on the field throughout the entire game.
So we still have at least half has to be played.
One half must complete one half.
Yeah.
Run the clock at 7, same as it is, and the game at 10, same as it is.
Okay.
Hey, Justin, real quick, I know that this came up a little bit too, but is it still possible for the game to be officially over when the 10 goal is hit and teams choose to continue to play, but knowing that the score will be reported? Is that something the schools can do?
So you're saying, could you hypothetically decide to continue playing even though 10 goals has been reached?
Yeah, if both coaches agree to say, hey, you know what, we've reached this point. Now our athletes are still going to play, but the game is officially over.
I would say that that's pretty commonplace. Doesn't really need to be a part of a proposal for this, but if officials want to stick around and officiate the rest of the game, and 2 coaches agree to playing the game, then that's kind of a after the game kind of fact that we can allow happen. But that's as far as the competitive game within the four corners of the game. I think that's just extra. That would be
Yeah,
agreed
I think-
upon by.
Yeah, Dan, I think you said that. Dan, I think you said that perfectly. I think CHSAA is regulating the game, and CHSAA is saying the game is over after 10, so we wouldn't want to include any additional wording that goes outside of. I mean, it's no longer a game at that point. But what happens? Yeah, CHSAA is putting verbiage in on the game.
I motion 7 goals, the clock runs, no players are taken off the field, a 10-goal differential, and a 1 half must be played.
I would second that.
All right.
Aye,
And then we just need all in favor.
Yeah. All right. So let's get a vote. All in favor of the motion passing. Say aye.
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 Okay. Was there anybody that opposed? All right.
Perfect.
Motion passes.
Perfect.
All right. Let's move on. 7v7.
All right, and again, this is really should be discussion for the group. Again, I'll just explain some of the reasoning behind why you'll see it here. So we had some two-way schools a couple of years ago in 2019, looked to bring some proposals together, but never quite were able to get some of the wording, I guess, the way they wanted it to officially propose it to the committee. And then in my last year on the NFHS Soccer Committee, there was some discussion about whether or not we would add some language to the rule book around 7-on-7, because there are some other states, I believe it was Maine, that sort of took the lead on this, that had some schools that would be interested in joining, but didn't have the numbers for 11-on-11. And so we would have to add just an example, like to the rule book, where it says if a team, you can play with 7, but if you fall below 7, the game would have to be terminated. So you'd have to change some of that wording in the rule book. And so again, in the notes that I sent out, this is really a long-term project, and really we're just here for discussion to see if this is something that we want to go back to the NFHS with, to get some of that wording changed. There would be a lot of work that would have to be done here. Again, change some of the wording in the NFHS rule book, to work with schools to add 7-on-7. We have to come up with field size, some of those things. And I don't want to get that started if there's no interest. So again, this is just discussion for the group. We're not looking to add 7v7 for the next cycle. Long-term project to see if that's something that the state would support. And so I know the committee has probably gotten a lot of feedback from membership on that. So I'll let you guys discuss now.
Yeah, I'll kick it off with comments that we received from the Mile High League, a large 2A classification league with schools all over from metro to rural, and they're not in favor of the 7v7. They understand that it works for football, but to get a true game of soccer, it really changes the game, becomes a different game, and they're just concerned that we're getting away from the sport altogether, and let's keep the purity of 11v11.
I'll chime in now. We lost 2 teams in the Black Forest League because they didn't have enough. We, Fountain Valley, played 3 teams this year that brought 10 players to the field. So I would be in favor of it. I'm not in favor of it replacing 2A, because I know it was a smaller school thing. I'd be in favor of it maybe being added. We're talking about official shortages. This is a sport or an opportunity to just have 1 official. You don't need 3 officials to do 7v7. So I think it brings in that, and schools like ourselves that don't have a feeder system. We don't have a middle school. So what we get is what we get. I've been blessed with what's come into the school the last couple of years, but I feel that's going to fade out a little bit. And I don't know if we'll have 15, 16, 17 kids. And if we've only got 11 or 12 that come out for soccer, chances are we didn't get we had to play Canyon City this year with 11 players when we had 18 because of senior retreats, injuries, suspensions, school suspensions. So I'm in favour of exploring it more. I know what coaches are saying. I understand that, but this could also increase membership. We have a lot of schools in the Black Forest League that could potentially play 7v7 and would be interested in playing 7v7. So it could get membership up a little bit there as well. So I'm in favour of keeping 11v11, but I'm definitely in favour of exploring this 7v7 option and making it maybe another classification. And also, to add to it a little bit, maybe giving JV teams the opportunity to play in that 7v7 league, so they're actually playing for something rather than just, oh, well, I'm on JV, so we're just going to play 5, 6, 7 friendlies. So that's my input and input from the Black Forest League.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. In addition to the 7v7 and looking what that looks like logistically, we look at, do we keep the field size the same? Do we change the field dimensions, the goal size? There's a lot of X factors with doing a 7v7. You get one kid who is decent, on a 7v7, he can probably do a lot of damage, but those are logistical things that would go into the rules portion of the sport if we further this conversation. So
does a rules set exist out there from a governing body around 7v7, or would that need to be created?
Yeah, I think US Soccer has some stuff on 7v7, but the NFHS does not.
We constantly in our league, similar to what Kevin was saying, have challenges on the JV side getting a full 11-11 game, and oftentimes that leads to cancellations. And so, if those rule sets were maybe spread out more to the membership, there could possibly be more games. I'd be surprised if we, surveyed CHSAA membership and we'd have enough schools interested in opting into a full state competition on 7v7, but I don't see a downside in spreading what the game looks like.
yeah, again, I hear what you're saying. If there were 7v, for instance, if you had a JV teams that wanted to play each other, that would almost fall into an after, a competition after a varsity game, if officials decide to stick around and do a 7v7 without the sanction of the sport. But I guess that's what we're talking about, is just seeing if there's any legs for this to take traction for 7v7 competitions in and of itself. So
Dan, I can, because I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing, this is great, two great points. I think from Kevin, that he doesn't want to see it replace 2A, and that it would essentially be the 5th classification of soccer. And so I think what I would need to do to present to you is some data that would say, from schools that currently do not offer soccer, a survey out to them to say, hey, if we added 7-on-7 soccer, would you consider starting a soccer team? Because I think if we're going to have an additional classification, we would need not to replace 2A and not, sort of water down those numbers of 2A, but actually add additional schools. So I can send out a survey to schools and say, if you don't offer soccer, would it be something that you would be interested in doing? Because I think everybody would be on board with saying, hey, 30 more teams that don't offer soccer, they can have their own 7-on-7 league, but maybe those numbers don't exist. I don't know. And then I'm
these
also
would be
hearing,
restricted to 1A classifications.
sure, or just it would be a 7-on-7 basically, and we would come up with a classification number for that, Dan. And obviously teams could appeal just like they do now to play down, just like 8-man and 6-man. There's a number for football. There's a number, enrollment number. We'd have that enrollment number for 7v7, and
Sure.
with the ability to appeal to play down.
Sure.
I'm also hearing a great point, and I was just jotting down notes. I don't remember who said it, but maybe we need some wording on 7v7 for JV. And so we've got some schools with numbers, like Kevin said, that he doesn't offer a JV program. Well, maybe if we put some wording in there and got some changes to the rule book that now Kevin at Fountain Valley could have a varsity 11v11 team and a 7v7 JV team, and we could come up with some rules and some playing rules that would accommodate that as well. So again, like I said, this is a long-term project, and I'm just trying to gather what data I need. I think from Kevin's point, I want to gather some data on what schools maybe would add 7v7 that don't currently offer any level of soccer. And then maybe presenting that option of schools that don't offer JV, or maybe their JV numbers struggle, that they want to do 7v7 as their JV option, and what that would look like too.
Justin,
Yeah.
I mean, we're a larger 4A school, and we, like in girls especially, struggle with, and in boys, we have struggled with our JV sizes and have played some of our league JV games just 7v7. But it would be really nice to have some recommendations as to, field size and goal size and those kinds of things, because we always get into a little bit of a discussion between the coaches. Well, we can't play on the full field because there's only 7 kids, and what, the goal size isn't, it's not really soccer then. And so if we just had some recommendations for JV 7v7, I think that would be great.
Sure. And like I said, this is by no means the discussion to add 7v7 for the next cycle. This is just me trying to gather information. And I think everyone's brought up amazing points of just sort of what the preferences would be, what some things that you guys have heard. And I'm hearing great things that, maybe we could, now we certainly don't want to replace 2A. This wouldn't be 5A, 4A, 3A, 7v7, but 5A, 4A, 3A, 2A, 7v7, and then some options for JV. So all things that I can start to work on with the NFHS and US Soccer, and trying to get some of their wording on how they officiate and what they sanction for 7v7, and some of those that we can present to you guys and maybe put into writing for either for reference for lower level games, or from maybe there's a need and some schools would say, yeah, we don't offer soccer, but if we only need 7, we'd love to. We'll see. I don't know. Any other further discussion or points that anyone has gathered on 7v7, talking with any of the membership that we should be aware of?
I think it was a good discussion. Tracking, getting that survey out, Justin, I think will be good. And maybe just making available what Carol was suggesting, how the other schools do it, and just sending that out or maybe putting that on the website under the soccer bulletin for those that want to enter into JV, scrimmages, contests after a varsity game, and at least you have some guidelines that are consistent across the board.
Definitely. Yep. We can start working on that.
All right. Any other conversation about that before we move on to minimums, game minimums, and all classifications? This is going to be.
Yeah. This
we'll
is
see
the
how
one
long
that
this
Yep. This is the conversation. I think we'll see how this goes. So currently, let me just tell you what we have around game minimums. And so the current wording is only for 2A. 2A is the only classification that has a game minimum. And this came up, these next 2 bullet points, 7.4 and 7.5 are really came from me. And then in 7.4, a little bit is talking with the Coaches Association as well, and some of their concerns. But the game minimum in 2A currently reads that you must play a total of 12 games, with at least 10 being against NFHS opponents. And then here is where it gets a little bit tricky, especially with COVID, is that the next sentence is that a reasonable attempt to play all games must be made. And so, I'm glad that it was worded that way with COVID, because I think that we had quite a few games, especially at some of our smaller classifications, that were canceled, and they found it extremely difficult to make those games up, especially if you're a 2A or a 3A school that's maybe in a little bit of a more remote location where it's not as easy if you're in the metro area to maybe find somebody else or travel quickly in a makeup game. And so we had games that were canceled, and speaking with the athletic directors, they made what I would classify as a reasonable attempt to reschedule, but in some cases they just could not for various reasons. And so I'm glad that reasonable attempt is there, but it's also, when you say reasonable attempt, it starts to go, well, what is reasonable, and how, if we're going to have a game minimum, how do we hold anybody to it? Because I mean, reasonable is a very difficult word. It's tough to say to somebody, yeah, you didn't make a reasonable attempt. It's very, very difficult. I almost couldn't say any situation where a reasonable attempt was made to play the game. So it's really not holding any weight, the current game minimum. So I guess the discussion here is, do we need a game minimum? If so, what should that minimum be, and what should the wording around it be? So this is a tough conversation, but I want to hear obviously from the committee.
This would come down to your opponents as well, because RPI will pick up on that, correct? Because like obviously in 2A, like you must play 12 games of the 15 must be against CHSAA recognized opponents.
10 NFHS recognized, 10 must be against, and so you could play,
10
you know,
chess
you could
members.
play Cheyenne East, you know, in Wyoming, and that would count as long as they're an NFHS member school. Yeah.
Justin, how do non-varsity opponents factor into this?
So non-varsity opponent. So if you were, I mean, there's nothing that says you couldn't play a JV team or a team, as an example, that's maybe from another state or in Colorado that's not sanctioned in our association and not sanctioned in another association. They would be considered non-varsity opponent. And so that would count towards your 12 games, but it would not count towards the 10 game against NFHS opponents. But then it came down to, Sean, I will say that there were schools that said, well, I had scheduled team A, who was CHSAA approved. That game got canceled because of their low numbers or because of COVID or because of travel or whatever, weather. And so I rescheduled with school B, who is a they had a game available because they're non-CHSAA, so they had space in their schedule. So I scheduled them. And I said, okay, a reasonable attempt was made, but you didn't get to 10 against NFHS members, or, you know, we only played 11 because COVID canceled. So a reasonable attempt was made, but you didn't get to 12. And that's where it became difficult. But to answer your question on non-varsity opponent, if it's a JV team or it's a non-sanctioned NFHS team, it counts towards your game minimum, but it does not count towards the RPI. It would not count towards the max preps, and it would not count towards your 10 NFHS member.
Okay, because that was a talking point from a couple coaches. I guess their understanding was non-varsity opponent meant JV opponent, and so they were fearing that teams were using that as a way to, like, a varsity team plays a JV team and that it's going into their rankings. But you just explained it that it does not.
Correct. Just to explain that a little better on that question from the coaches, I would say 99% of if you look at max preps and you see non-varsity opponent, I will say 99% of those games are against non-CHSAA sanctioned teams. They are not against, I'll just use Colorado Academy. They're not against Colorado Academy's JV team. They are against a school that is not sanctioned through the NFHS, either CHSAA or in the state that they're in. And those games
Like Windsor
do not count.
Charter, Windsor Charter.
Exactly
Ascent,
right. Exactly right.
CEC.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And those games do not count in the RPI, and they do not count in the max preps. If you go look at a school that's played a non-varsity opponent, and you look at their record in the RPI, their record on max preps might be 8-4. 2 of those wins were against non-varsity opponents. If you look in the RPI, their record will be 6-4.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yep. So I guess the discussion again is, do we want a game minimum? Do we want it for all classifications? Are we comfortable with the way it is now? And I just make the determination on what reasonable means. What's the feedback,
was there
Dan? I'd like
somebody
to hear
on
from all-
here? Was there somebody on here that was suggesting earlier in our preamble at the beginning that the minimum games was necessary for higher classifications?
Dan, that point might have come from me from our coaches meeting. Is there's some discussion out there that schools will see kind of what's coming up and not play those games, knowing that it could negatively affect their RPI. So that's
So how do they get out of playing those games?
that I don't have that information. I don't have that answer. But there's
Okay, that can be easily fixed with contracts. I mean, that can be easily. CHSAA has the tools in place to make sure that doesn't happen with teams, particularly non-league games, to sign contracts and then hold people to the fire to, hey, compel them to play the game.
Carol, have you gotten any feedback from your side of the state? Because I will say that when we did see teams that were struggling to get to that minimum, and it's for 3A, 4A, and 5A, we didn't have it, but I would say there were a few in your neck of the woods that didn't get to that number, 3A, 4A, and 5A, and then a couple in the 2A classification that didn't get to that number. And we had spoken, and I made the determination that they made the reasonable attempt because they did attempt to play those games. They just couldn't, but it's more difficult on your side of the state sometimes to reschedule games. So was there any feedback or did schools in your area feel a need for a minimum, or what was their thought process around that?
I didn't get any specific feedback from the smaller schools, but you're absolutely right in that reasonable attempt. It's a reasonable attempt in the metro area and a reasonable
Absolutely.
attempt on the western slope are pretty different.
Two different things for
Right.
sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's difficult. And obviously you're dealing with, a lot more than you can't drive. Oftentimes you can't drive 2 minutes down the road to find an opponent or find maybe a charter school as a non-member to get to that 12th game. Much more difficult. And that's where, again, the ones in 2A that I had to make a decision on, in every instance, for me, it was reasonable. And so again, do we need a minimum? Are we okay with me making that decision on what's reasonable? Do we want to take it out and make it hard? I just want to know what the membership thinks around this. Because again, this did come from discussions from the Coaches Association and bringing this up.
I'll tell you the genesis of this. This came about with a 2A school 2 years ago that cracked the top 4 ranking in the state with 6 games on their schedule. And when it came to strictly RPI, they got pinned against an opponent and got killed. So it in fairness and justice, the argument was there was a better team that could have taken their spot at the 4 spot or whatever spot it was, to create a more competitive balance in those that were selected to go to state. So
yeah, and I think
that's where it came from. I don't think
you're exactly right, Dan. And what I think we did and what this committee did a tremendous job of doing it, and we'll see that when we get to the league and classification review, is that 2A previously to when Dan, you and I and this committee sat down and made some adjustments, and now we have the regions in 2A, where before we had all these independent schools in 2A that had no opponents to play. And now we've said that you must play the teams that are in your region. And so we don't have anybody really that's in a region that's either through their own league, in a mixed classification league like the Frontier, the Confluence League, or the Metro League now with some 2A schools, or with like Mile High East and West in the region there. They are getting 9-10 games through their league, and then they're easily able to move over and play some crossover games. So we're not seeing
excellent
those changes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
those changes
that speaks to the growth of soccer.
Yeah.
Speaks to the growth of soccer and the organizational leagues to pull individual teams in. Excellent point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see. after our discussion, I'd like to see a motion on this, on game minimums.
And it could just be that we leave it as is,
Yep.
Dan, or we get rid of it. I mean, I think that if people want me to make the decision on what's reasonable, I think you brought up a good point as well, Dan. If somebody doesn't make any attempt and just plays 7 league games, that's not doing what was intended. But if they're, I would say everybody at least made some kind of an attempt in 2A, and we're not really seeing an issue in the other classifications either. But again, I will leave that up to this committee. But I think this committee did an amazing job with 2A, and you're going to see it. I think this year we had 32 schools in 2A. Next cycle, we have 52 schools in 2A. So 2A is going to look a lot different. And I think some of those issues that we had are going away because of the work of this committee.
And I'm sorry, I misspoke, Dan. So they're saying that the schools are just intentionally not scheduling 15 games in the fear that if they play someone else in and around their region, it's going to negatively affect their RPI.
I've seen that before too. Yep. Yeah.
So they're saying like in 4A this year, there was a team that played 11 games. 7 of them were in 4A, but they got a top, like they were number 11.
And see, this is the importance of this bylaw. It's for that. And it is therefore a minimum game standard for 15 game season is, what's reasonable to have a minimum of to be to qualify for playoffs, to keep them from only scheduling. I mean, 11
Is it possible to do it per classification? Is that unreasonable?
Well, we currently have it with just 2A.
Just 2A, yeah. Yeah, he's asking if we can
Like at 5A, 4A, 3, and 2A all have different game minimums? Is that?
No, they're all the same. I think they're all 15.
Right, but that's the max. Yeah, I think Sean was asking.
Oh,
if
minimum.
everybody-
Yeah, minimum. Yeah.
Because I think we do have to acknowledge that there are areas of our state that makes it challenging. Like we can't overlook that piece.
Well, again, that's why it was brought in, but with the number of schools that are being added to the sport and added to leagues, is that a necessary?
It's worked really well in 2A. I mean, this past year, Fountain Valley, with playing Thomas McLaren in the quarterfinals, we played them 3 times, but it didn't hurt us. Crested Butte played Telluride 3 times, I think, or at least twice. And then Ridgeway, not ideal when you have to play them, but that's state playoff soccer. So, I've really not heard any complaints from 2A as far as they have to play 12 games against CHSAA or high school affiliated programs to be able to be eligible for the playoffs. And to me personally, I've not had any complaints. I can't speak. Maybe Sean's had some within 2A, but it seemed to have worked really well once we brought it in, and everybody plays at least 12 games and are eligible. And those that are not, I believe, Justin, they tell you, hey, we're going to play, but we're not going to be eligible for playoffs. So you already know when you're looking at the RPI rankings, that team's not going to be playing because they've already declared that they're not going to be in a part of it. So for 2A, it's worked really well. I can't speak for the other 3A, 4A, 5A because I'm not heavily involved in that, but 2A, it's worked really well.
Yeah, we do have a couple of boys teams that say, listen, I know there's a game minimum. We're not going to get there. We're fine with that. We're just not going to participate in the posting.
Yeah.
There are 2 schools that.
Yeah. Hey, Justin, do you have that email from the Mile High League that maybe gives some points to the alternative of what we're talking about here? I don't have it pulled up. I just tried looking for it and couldn't find it. I think I deleted it.
Did they bring up the minimum in that email? That I'm not sure of.
Oh, they were talking Mercy Roll, weren't they?
I think there was, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that, if we did a 12 game, if we keep 2A, 12 game minimum and carry that across the board, certainly metro, urban, suburban areas can. What's the con?
I guess my concern is probably the 12 minimum would be fine, but again, we go back to even for a 5A schools on the western slope of finding teams to play.
Yeah, but have the Western Slope teams ever had difficulty finding 12 games? Ever? 4A and 5A
No,
teams?
12, that's what I said. 12, I think would be absolutely fine.
Okay, gotcha.
You know, if you go to 14 or something like that, then I think we run. A lot of it is, you know, the travel issue is, can all the schools afford to make how many trips over to the play on the Eastern Slope? It's, as you guys know, difficult to talk people into coming over here. So it becomes a little bit of a financial burden if you're going to say we have to have a minimum of 14 or 15. I mean, I think 12, I don't think is an issue.
Okay.
I think we would still need that wording in there about, you know, reasonable attempts, so that if there was a situation like the school that was being mentioned on the Western Slope in 4A that didn't get to 12, did make an attempt to get to that number, but because of snow or travel or COVID or whatever, wasn't able to, you know, we wouldn't want to punish them for having, you know, not being able to get, you know, over the pass for a week and not playing 3 games.
Yeah, and that term, that phrase, reasonable attempts is subjective, that I always go back to, like, man, I wish we could put something more definitive into what that is, you know, dates on a calendar or weather but hey, that's another conversation. We go on for another hour on that. So I don't know. I'm not seeing a real con to adding a 12-game minimum across the board. It meets what Sean's talking about. Yep, someone's talking.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of want to bring up what Sean had mentioned during his coaching report about the girls' season feeling a lot shorter, and I believe is actually a little bit shorter.
Mhm.
And the fact that that is also the season most impacted by weather in Colorado. And
So they would be fine just scheduling 12 games.
I'm sorry.
So they would, so they would be fine just scheduling 12 games and no more.
I know that there are schools out there that only schedule 14. I don't know if they just schedule 12, but I think that the imbalance there means that a rule for 12 games between those 2 seasons is difficult in that manner, because, you know, losing 4 games in the spring season is a lot easier to do with a couple major snowstorms than losing 4 games in the dry fall.
Yeah, and in safety, I remember being in a couple different scenarios where you have to squeeze that game in, and then all of a sudden your kids are playing 4 or 5 games in 1 week. It's just not, just to get a 30-year season in 1 week that's few and far between. But I've been a part of coaching that exact scenario. So, yeah. So let's get I appreciate that input. Let's get
I motion that 12-game minimum across 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, with CHSAA, i.e. Justin, making a decision on reasonable effort to play games.
Yeah, I don't think we can put that part in the motion as much as we like Justin, but we could.
I guess just a minimum 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A, 12-game minimum.
And we can keep the wording reasonable attempt to play all games must be made.
We'll keep that.
A reasonable attempt to play all games.
Yeah.
Now, do we want to keep, because currently there's 10 against NFHS opponent. Do we want that in 2A? Do we want that to go across the board? That 12, if 12 is going to be the minimum, do we want to keep 10 against NFHS opponents as well? Which I think that was probably more of the key, speaking with some people that were in place when this came in. the 10 against NFHS, I think, was a big part because there were some schools that were just going and playing, these schools that had no affiliation and there was no real knowledge of who they were and are they really considered varsity? And so that's why you said, okay, well, got to play 10 against a sanctioned school. So do you want to keep that wording?
I mean, yes, I would keep it. I mean, I know in 2A there's going to be an increase of schools, so there's more schools to play, or there will be more schools to play in the future.
Yes. And there's some schools that teams were playing that were not members that will be members next cycle. That's going to help too. Windsor Charter is an example.
I think keeping the word in doesn't hinder anybody.
Hey, Justin, how many leagues are there that have teams in multiple classifications in the same league?
We'll see that. And when we go through the classification breakdown, well, quite a few.
All right. Because I'm just taking some feedback here from some coaches who are listening in, but they're just, if I schedule 12 games and those 12 games are my league opponents and I schedule 3 non-league games against brand new 2A schools, I'm almost doing the same thing, so they're just.
Yeah, but
there has to be a percentage of the same classification.
That's going to be that would be the way leagues are made up right now. That would be a very difficult task.
Yeah.
And I would say that the max preps, that max preps rankings will factor that in. The RPI currently does not, but I can just tell you that would get serious pushback as this goes to get approved, just based on what leagues look like and just how many multi-class leagues that there are.
Yeah, I agree.
So if I redo my motion to 12 game minimum with 10 being played against CHSAA or high school regulated teams across 2A, 3A, 4A, and 5A.
So that would, just to clear that wording up, that would be what Kevin is saying, it would be minimum 12 games with at least 10 against NFHS opponents across all classifications and then Kevin, were you adding reasonable attempt to play all games must be made?
Yes, reasonable attempt to play all games, yes.
All right, can I get a second on that? And then we'll do further discussion.
I'll second that.
All right. Thank you, Carol. All right, any further discussion before we vote on that specific motion? Twelve is a good number. Ty, you good with that?
Anybody opposed to that wording?
All right, get it all in favor of making this motion of voting approval of this motion, say aye.
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 Okay, anybody opposed?
Yeah, I'm opposed.
Is that Mike?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be 4 in favor and 1 against.
All right, let's move on to gate lists.
All right, gate lists. So the current gate list, I mentioned this before, this one's coming, I'll just be honest, this one's coming straight from me. The current gate list, well, this is the only one. This gate list one is coming from me. Nobody brought this up.
So is this one we vote on, or is this just for discussion?
Yes, we're gonna vote on this. I'm not just gonna make something without your approval, but so currently the gate list is 25 players, 5 additional coaches, staff, whatever it might be. We have gotten, every single year we'll get some emails, or a coach or somebody comes to school, says, well, can we get our videographer in? Can we get our C team coach in? And there's every time there is somebody looking to get 1 or 2 additional people in on the gate list. And so I would say more often than not, and Whitney probably hates me for this, but I'm a little bit more lenient. I'll say, okay, yes, we'll get this person in. And so what I'm proposing,
Guilty.
yeah. And what I'm proposing is that we increase the gate list from 5 additional personnel to 7. So it would be 25 players plus 7 additional. So if you need your assistant trainer or your videographer or whatever it might be added to the gate list, we could do that. It would mirror exactly what we did for field hockey. Field hockey in our committee meeting increased the gate list to 25 rostered players and 7, we'll call them additional personnel. And so I am proposing that we have 25 rostered players, 7 personnel, so that when you need that, and that we would be hard on that, and I would stop being so nice. When you need that additional person on there, you'd have it available to you with now two people added to your gate list. Not really a downside here. Just trying to be nice and have something in writing. So when Whitney yells at me for letting somebody's videographer in, I can show her in writing that we're allowed to do that now.
So this is just the nuts and bolts. CHSAA question: Are you Justin allowed to put something on the table for us to vote on, or does this need to be a proposal from somebody?
Yeah, no, I think we're okay here.
Okay.
This is not inherent to the rules or gameplay or anything like that. This is really CHSAA clerical. Kicked it over, and I think we're okay here because this really is simply a clerical thing on adding the gate list, which we oversee.
So being
Really,
that it's clerical and managed, is it something we need to vote on, or is it just something that
it's going to go into the bulletin, Dan, and so I would prefer it to just be a motion to come through and approved from.
Can I get a motion?
I would make a motion to increase the gate list to 27, 25 of those being players.
32.
32. Correct. Sorry, 32. 25 being players, 7 being personnel.
All right. Thanks, Ty. Can I get a second?
I second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I was going to do it just to.
Yeah.
All right. Motion passes unanimously. All right. Moving on to forfeited games.
All right. Now this should be a quick one to really, and this is what we did in the field hockey committee meeting, is that I recently with COVID, we've had some discussion on, do we need wording around in the bulletin? Some other sports are looking to add it. I don't think it's something that we as a committee right now can come up with that wording. But what we decided in field hockey and what I am recommending now is that we created just a small committee, me and like the league president of the Field Hockey Association, the Coaches Association. So really we're talking about like me, Sean, and Dan sitting down and trying to come up with some potential wording around forfeited games and how that looks, and what would constitute a forfeit, because we've seen it more often now where school, and maybe we don't need it, and the committee wouldn't like the wording, we can't come up with wording, but it would really just be our small group trying to create some wording, bringing it to this committee for their take, and then approving it down the road on what a forfeit would look like and when a no contest would occur. And I would say most leagues have this wording for their leagues, but really we're talking about a non-league game where 2 schools had agreed to play, couldn't play. The kids kick down the kid, you kick the can down the road, and the game ultimately isn't played. And when it becomes a forfeit, and when it becomes maybe a no contest. So really, I think we're just saying, is the committee okay with Sean, myself, and Dan sitting down, trying to come up with some wording around forfeits, and bringing that to the committee maybe next year to get something into the bulletin? Or do you think there shouldn't be any wording around forfeits? But we've seen more of it. It's becoming, I don't want to say an issue, but there's been more and more instances where teams cannot agree to play and we have nothing in wording that in writing that says what the next steps are.
So if my understanding is correct, if a forfeit happens, then in COVID terms, it's been really prevalent just because of all the teams that have had to back out of games, but electing to make that forfeited game a no contest and then allowing the other team to be able to go and find another game. But that would have to be agreed upon, I would think, by both ADs and I would even say and CHSAA in that respect. As the further we get away from COVID, where it's not going to, hopefully, knock on wood, that it's not as prevalent as it is now. Turning over those forfeited games to the opportunity to do no contest, but again, it would have to be. But you know what?
And we have that currently, Dan. We have that, and I would say what's coming up though is you've got schools that maybe because it's not always COVID, weather, transportation, whatever it might be, and a school can't play, and maybe it's late in the season, and the other school can't find an opponent to play, and there's been some talk of well, we want you to forfeit. And the school says, well, we're not, we're on the Western Slope, we can't get a bus, and so there's just some discussion there. And again, do we need something in writing on just not really when it's a forfeit, but also when it's a no contest? And so, again, this is really just discussion. We're not looking to vote anything in now. More of just does the committee feel like next year we should be working on some of that wording to bring to this committee some actual wording where we get something in place and maybe get some more discussion around it with other sports, so we have some consistency and potentially bring something forward. Does soccer feel like we don't need forfeited rules around forfeit? But I would say based on the number of times I've had to intervene, it seems to me like it's becoming more of an issue.
Is it more of an issue with soccer than any other sport, or do you know across?
It's more of an issue with soccer than any other sport that I personally oversee, yes.
But what about other sports that CHSAA
Football has wording. So I think it was an issue in football, and they're structured a little bit differently because you can't play 2 games in a week or back-to-back games in football like you can in soccer. So they have some wording. They have wording on it. And I think other sports are looking to maybe follow suit and get some wording around that as well, because it's coming up more. And I would say soccer, it happens of lacrosse, field hockey, swimming, ice hockey, of all those sports that we oversee, soccer is by far where it comes up the most.
Okay.
So I think, is everyone okay with Dan and I and Sean sitting down and trying to come up with some wording around maybe some, and not saying that we come up with the wording and that's going to be it, but coming up with some wording for you guys to maybe review at the next meeting. Do you feel like we need that wording moving forward?
Yes, I think it's smart. Let's look at it.
Okay. So Dan, we'll schedule some time over the next, few weeks, new year, where we can come up with some wording and get the ball rolling on that. And we can work with some other sports as well to see what they're coming up with, because I know other sports are having the same discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to automatic qualifiers.
All right. So auto qualifiers. Again, this has come up from Coach Association and some leagues as well on number of auto qualifiers. So this was brought up on, currently we have the auto qualifiers at one auto qualifier for leagues of between 3 and 6 teams. Leagues with 7 or more teams get 2 auto qualifiers in classifications 3A through 5A. In the 2A classification, it is 1 auto qualifier just because of the limited number of spaces there. It is 1 auto qualifier for all regions in 2A. So the proposal is that leagues of 3 or more teams to infinity get 1 auto qualifier, no more 7 or more get 2, and that all other spots in the postseason are determined using the RPI max preps combination that the board of directors has dictated. So I'll open that up for discussion.
Justin, just so I heard you correctly, so you would eliminate the 7+ team leagues as they would be guaranteed only one qualifier.
Yes, and I went back and looked at some numbers, and I would say in almost every scenario, there's it happened this year, and I think maybe one other time, where what happens more often than not, because you always get these big leagues and say, oh, we need that second team. We have a huge league. We should be guaranteed two. Happened once this year, and I think one other time. But what has happened more often than not is these big leagues are almost always going to get their second team in the top 32. But what I've seen happen quite often, and what they're not thinking about, is that sometimes these leagues of like 7 or 8 teams what will happen is in these big leagues is that their like 8th, 7th place team will get bumped because they were 32nd, and you've got maybe a weaker league that their second auto qualifier has bumped now a team from a larger, maybe stronger league from getting in. So that's what I saw more often than not. So you've got sometimes these large leagues saying, oh, we have to have two, but it's almost across the board where the first place team almost always is an auto going to be in the top 32. The second team typically is in the top 32 anyways. And so really you're just looking at what happens more often than not is a team outside the top 32 is bumping a team that's a second place team outside the top 30 that's bumping a team from a large league. They're like 5th or 6th team. That's what happens more often than not. But I think at the end of the day, we want representation from the entire state. But I think soccer is the only sport where we have two, where leagues are getting 2 auto qualifiers. Anymore, it's really just one.
Justin, can you clarify in multi-class leagues how that works with auto qualifiers?
Sure can. So as an example, let's use the Confluence League. So the Confluence League, if they have, let's just say currently, if they have 7 schools that are 3A and 3 schools that are 2A, they would get, and I think they do have that in girls, they would get 2 auto qualifiers in 3A based on them having 7 or more teams, and they would get 1 auto qualifier in 3A based on them having the three teams required there. So they would get 3 auto qualifiers. What we would say now is that if you've got 3 or more, you would get to 1 auto qualifier. So the Confluence League would get 1 auto qualifier in 3A based on them having 7 teams, more than 3 teams, and they would get 1 auto qualifier in 2A based on them having 3 schools in the 2A classification as well.
And then if they have less than 3A,
yeah,
they
so
would
like
need
in a
to win
league,
their
so I'll
league out.
give, yeah, so I'll give an example of the Metro League in the next classification, in the next cycle. The Metro League will have, I believe, 9 schools in 3A, and they'll have 1 school in the boys in 2A. And so they would get that based on current wording, they would get 2 auto qualifiers in 3A because they have 7 or more teams in 3A. Their 2A school, because there's only 1, would qualify only if they were into the RPI.
Or if they won the league outright?
No,
Okay.
they would have to qualify through the RPI because the 3A school is not losing an auto qualifier to a 2A school. They have 9, 10, 9, whatever it is, 9 or 10 3A. They could finish, the 3A schools could finish 2nd and 3rd in the league. And they would get that auto qualifier. They would not lose their 2 auto qualifiers. The 2A school would only qualify through the RPI or the formula that the board of directors comes up with.
I mean, I think it makes sense from a 3A perspective. I think the challenging thing is that I often hear in our league meetings, athletic directors hoping for the most auto qualifiers possible. And so, it's hard to make that change and explain it, even though I realize it rarely ever happens that an auto qualifier doesn't qualify by RPI.
Yeah, I would say really the only change we're talking about here, we're not changing anything around mixed classification leagues and how you get your one auto qualifier. The only difference is that we would get rid of, nobody would get two anymore. It would all be one. There'd be, again, no change to how that's done. It would just be one, even if you had 7 schools in a league or 8 schools or 9 schools or 10 schools in a league. But again, I've rarely seen where in those leagues, a second place team isn't already in the top 32. So really all you're doing is hurting your 5th and 6th place team in your league if somebody else grabs an auto qualifier that's not in the top, not the top 32.
I mean, if the state tournament's going to be the state tournament and it's our showpiece event for the schools and teams in our state, then I think it should be league champions, and then the next best teams fill the bracket.
Yeah,
According
you
to
certainly want representation from the state. So leagues need to have their teams in there. That's an important piece.
Yeah.
I like the 3, because there are different leagues, mixed classification leagues, and there should be representation from all parts of the state. The question is just soccer has, I think, the only sport where we have 2. And so do we want to just continue with 1?
But I also think this helps drive the discussion from earlier, where it's going to put more accountability on the schools. Because now I just can't rely on being first or second. I've got to think about a different way to approach it.
So the motion would be leagues of 3 or more would get their automatic qualifier. Everybody else qualifies through the RPI max preps combo. So we'll just essentially we'll just be removing these leagues of 7 or more, get 2 auto qualifiers. And we would need a motion and then a second and a vote. To
Get a
that.
second.
Oh, we need a we need a motion and then a second.
Oh, sorry. Get a
Yep.
motion for that.
A motion that each league with 3 or more gets 1 auto qualifier and the rest qualify through RPI.
You get a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Yeah, thank you, Carol.
Just quickly
Discussion.
before vote,
Yeah.
Justin, did you hear any feedback from schools on this in particular? I haven't really heard anything.
I'd like to hear that, Sean, what the coaches think, but for me, I think most people that I've spoken with would be in favor of this. I have gotten some that would not be, and that's from, schools, without naming names, that's, from schools in 7, 18 leagues that maybe traditionally aren't as higher in the RPI, that could potentially lose. But I will say it is not very often that, your top 2 teams aren't in a 32 team bracket with 50 schools. It's very rare that your top 2 teams aren't going to get in that top 32 anyways. It happens, there's maybe one, if you look every year, there's maybe 1, maybe 2 across all classifications where a second place team in a league is not in the top 32 and bumps a top 32 team out.
Yeah. So Justin, the feedback from our association is this would be a good thing.
All right.
I think you're going to get a better representation of who should be in the state tournament based on their performance, not just based on because they're in a bigger league.
And we would still, the big thing for me is we have to honor those league champs, and we would still be doing that.
Absolutely.
100%. Like your league, hey, you got your team in, this team, they're in, and now we're going to fill the bracket with potentially stronger teams, and coaches in schools have to own that, right? And that's the accountability piece of like, now I got to really look at my non-leagues here and figure out what's going to best position my group to get in.
Yep. So all those in favor, say aye.
I
Aye.
I,
Aye. All those opposed? All right, unanimous. Seating the bracket.
Okay, so Dan and I, we spoke a little bit about this before, and I spoke to this committee before we came live about this addition to the agenda. But what the feedback that we've gotten was on how we see the bracket. Currently, the RPI this year, the RPI gets you in, and then the new seating formula, coach, max preps, RPI would essentially seed you on the bracket. And so what we've heard and the feedback we've gotten was that we need consistency. And so what we are proposing, the proposal here is that the board of directors mandated capture of the bracket, which is RPI and max preps, would also seed the bracket to eliminate that confusion on, well, how come I'm looking online and I'm the 8th seed and I see the brackets posted and I'm 14. Oh, well, you know, we use these different criteria now to seed it. And so you've dropped down. And so if the committee that came together said that RPI max preps is the best way to figure out who the teams are, then I don't see how we could go against that and try to come up with something different. If they're saying, if their research and their discussion, their surveys determine that the way to determine the best teams is this way, how we could go and say we need to do something else to seed doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so what I think you're going to see is that every sport will go to a more consistent model where we're going to use the exact same formula to seed, to capture, and to seed the bracket. And so that is the discussion there. And Mike, I think we lost you. Mike, what point did you hop off the meeting? Mike, were you frozen during the vote?
Sorry, school-wide internet outage.
No. I want to make sure that, yeah. So when we voted on the auto qualifiers, you might have frozen. Or were you for or against that?
I am for.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure. So Mike, the discussion here now is on seeding the bracket. Again, a committee was formed with the board of directors to decide what the best way of determining capturing the bracket was. They determined that max preps RPI combination was the best way. And I think for consistency purposes that we need to, if they are saying in their research that that was the best way to determine the teams, then we should seed the bracket using the exact same formula to avoid confusion while still avoiding league opponents in the first round and factoring in geography. If there's a simple move to, eliminate somebody driving 4.5 hours, we could still do that, but not changing the top 16. Everyone's earned that right to host, but seeding the bracket using the same formula that gets you in. Discussion on that.
Who would be on the seating committee?
It would be a league, same as it is now, one representative from every league.
Region.
But Sean, it would be, the seating committee really would just be looking at league matchups. We'd be discussing travel because the majority of the work as it is now would be done before we get into the meeting based on the rankings that come out. And I can tell you right now that in the discussions with board of directors, it sounds like there will be some limitations on what can be used. And so I don't think the coaches pool will be one of those. So I don't think we can ever bring that back as a way to determine the seating, because that will not be a given option from the board of directors. So really all the feedback we've gotten from leagues and from schools is consistency. And there's just a confusion on why are we saying that this should determine the bracket and we're using something completely different to seed. The public is confused because they're looking all year online at their team being number 9, and then they look at the bracket and they're 14, and that's because all of a sudden we use this different formula to seed the bracket. So
And we knew this was coming because just a few years ago when everybody said, oh, we need transparency, let's go to RPI, and no human element. We all knew that this was gonna happen. So now here we are, balancing, having the pendulum swung completely in the other direction, and now we're trying to land it in the middle. I think that's my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, the big word is consistency, and that's what we're looking to do here, is be consistent with other sports, consistent with the way we capture the bracket, and saying in our wording to be voted on by Legislative Council that we will capture and seed the bracket in the same manner.
Yeah. So can I get a motion for the seeding?
And the motion would be to capture and seed the bracket in the same manner.
I'll make a motion to capture and seed the bracket in the same manner using the RPI and max preps.
Thank you, Carol.
I second.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, any further discussion?
I guess, Justin, would CHSAA then put out a composite rankings throughout the season, or would it be up to individual schools to kind of determine how those two polls are combined, or how those two ratings?
No, it would be
That's a
the
good
board of,
question.
great question. The board of directors will mandate exactly how it will be done. What we're saying is that how that mandate comes out with the capture will be used to seed. So what that mandate is and how we capture the bracket, that will be a seeding, capturing it, that ranking will be used to seed.
I guess then if you really want transparency, though, you got to have that map.
And it will be posted. They will be transparent. What those rankings are will be posted in real time throughout the season.
Right.
Yeah. So you will know in a continuous loop as scores are put into max preps, and it refreshes every half hour, whatever it is. You will see in real time where you were ranked and where you will fall on the bracket.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. It's like Kevin stepped away.
Okay. But I think
all those not in favor.
yeah, and Kevin seconded the motion, so I would assume.
Yeah, he did. That's right. All right. Unanimous. All right, calendar review for reasons that Justin described earlier. We'll skip for this meeting.
Yep, and so I do want to just go over I'm going to just go quickly over the girls' calendar for the spring, just so people are aware. And this I think we already did send this out actually, but we'll just go over it quickly anyways. So we have the first practice on Monday, February 28th. The first scrimmage foundation game will be March 5th. March 10th is the first contest. The end of the regular season will be on May 7th. May 10th is the 5A first round. May 11th, 4A first round. 3A first round is May 12th. 5A second round, 2A first round, May 13th. May 14th, 3A and 4A second round and the 2A quarterfinals. May 16th is the 5A quarters. May 17th, 3A, 4A quarters. May 19th, 3A, 4A, 5A semis. The 2A semis are May 21. And then we will have the 3A, 4A championship, May 24th, and the 2A, 5A championship on May 25th. We sent those dates out to schools and the membership so that you guys can plan. I know how important planning is. Everyone should have gotten that in an email from me like a month ago, but I just wanted to review those for the committee formally here. So, all right, Dan, should we move on to the
Classification
Okay.
and league review, and just to keep up with my clock, we've got about 10 minutes. So
Yep. So let me bring these up. All right. So you are now looking at what, and this will be sent out as well. So everyone will have this again for full. Pardon? Yes. Sorry. The qualifiers. We will change the wording on this, obviously, with the qualifiers. We will adjust that to read 1. for every league. And so here is the 5A classification for the boys. The biggest change that you will notice is the EMAC has dissolved. The EMAC has dissolved. Everybody highlighted in yellow is moved into a new league. So if you see somebody in yellow, that is a league change that was approved by the clock committee. So we've got North Glen moving into the Front Range, what will be called the Front Range. I think they're still working on wording on their league names, but right now their working name is Front Range South. North Glen will come in there. Brighton and Prairie View, 5A, will be in the Front Range North. Erie is also in the Front Range North. You don't see them here because they are 4A. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Denver has combined with some teams in the EMAC. So you will see Westminster, Rangeview, Hinckley, and Vista Peak are now members of the Denver Public League. They will join East and South. And we have some new members in the Colorado League, Adams City and Gateway. So you'll see basically North Glen, Brighton, Prairie View, Westminster, Rangeview, Hinckley, Vista Peak, Adams City, and Gateway were former members of the EMAC. That league has dissolved, and you will see them sprinkled throughout 5A here in some different leagues. 4A. 4A, we've got Skyline moving from, I believe they were in the Northern CO League, over to Longs Peak. Lutheran has moved from the Metro League into, they were a 3A school and now 4A. They've moved into the Pikes Peak League. So you'll see them now with Air Academy, Cheyenne Mountain, Discovery Canyon, Lewis Palmer, Palmer Ridge, and Lutheran, new member there. And Erie, I mentioned Erie earlier. Scroll down just a bit. You will see Erie there at the bottom. They're in the Front Range North League. And so you'll see, again, all of the leagues and the schools that are members of 4A. We have 68 schools, next classification, currently in the 4A. Not a whole lot of change in 4A, other than just the Colorado League. You'll see Thornton and Skyview now are two schools. I think it was just Skyview last year. Thornton, I believe, was the other school. Was Thornton in the Colorado League last year, or are they a new member there? So I can't remember if they were part of the EMAC and they're moving, but regardless, they're 4A in the Colorado League. Oh, another change Whitney brought up. You will see for boys, the South Western League, Grand Junction Central and Fruita Monument, both 4A for the boys. Fruita Monument was a 5A school in this current cycle. Next cycle, they will be 4A. So the Southwestern League will have 5 schools on the boys' side in the 4A League. And I believe those are the big changes there. I don't think there's really anything else. Moving down to 3A. You'll see the 3A leagues there. Woodland Park is now in the Tri-Peaks League. Tri-Peaks League is now, I believe, just a 3A and a 2A league. I think they had like an East and a West in this current cycle, and they are now just going to be a 3A and a 2A league. They've added Woodland Park. Woodland Park was in CSML South, so I guess that was a change that we saw in 4A. Woodland Park used to be in CSML South. They are now 3A Tri-Peaks. Arvada, Fort Lupton, and Inglewood will be joining the Frontier League. So Frontier League now will include those 3 schools. The Metro League has added the Academy and Eagle Ridge Academy. Mentioned that earlier, talking about some of those qualifiers. So Lutheran left the Metro League, Eagle Ridge and the Academy have joined the Metro League. And then Dan, in your league there in the Patriot, we've added quite a few schools, two new CHSAA members next year, Timnath and Wellington. They will, and STEM Highlands Ranch. Oh, I'm sorry, STEM Highlands Ranch, also a new member, will be added into the Confluence League. So STEM Highlands Ranch, Timnath, Wellington, all brand new CHSAA members next year. Timnath and Wellington into the Patriot League, along with Weld Central and Berthoud, and STEM Highlands Ranch into the Confluence League. So we have, and then Gunnison played
Justin,
this year.
I gotta correct you. It's Timnath.
Timnath.
I don't want Ernie.
Sorry.
I don't want you to get,
Timnath.
hit over
They're
the
a new
head.
member, so yes, yeah. I
Timoth High
apologize.
School is the new high school for Poudre School District.
Yes.
To go
Timoth.
with Rocky, Loveland, or Rocky, Collins, Poudre, and Fossil.
Perfect. And then you'll see Gunnison there. Gunnison was added in the middle of the cycle this year. So they essentially played as an independent. They're members of the Western Slope League, and they will qualify, have the opportunity next year, the start of the new cycle, to qualify automatically as a part of the Western Slope League. So you'll see Gunnison had a boys soccer team this year, but they were a mid-cycle ad, qualified through the RPI. They will be in the West Slope League next year and have the opportunity to qualify automatically to that league. STEM Islands Ranch, Timoth, and Wellington we spoke about. And I think those are the only real changes for 3A there, but everyone's seen that. You're really going to see the change in 2A, because again, we talked about the addition of several new schools. So here's what 2A will look like in the next cycle. We've got the Confluence League, Lotus, Addenbrook, William Smith they will now have 3 schools in 2A, and they'll have an automatic qualifier. Frontier League will have 4 schools playing at 2A, and they will now have an automatic qualifier in 2A out of the Frontier League. Sheridan, Bennett, Jefferson, and Lake County all now in 2A. You'll see Estes Park is a 2A school now. Manual is a 2A school now. Vale Mountain is a 2A school. And then you'll see the addition of Vanguard Classical, Twin Peaks Charter, and Windsor Charter. Those are all new CHSAA members. They will be coming into the 2A classification based on their numbers. And then you've got Colorado Springs Christian and St. Mary's are now in the Black Forest League. St. Mary's new to 2A, Colorado Springs Christian new to the Black Forest League. And then you will see Skyview Academy and Bishop Matchbuff. Those schools have left the Metro League and are now in the Mile High East region there. So you'll see those 2 schools added there. Very, very excited about the additions to 2A, much more robust with our numbers. I think we've got some great additions to 2A, both with new classification enrollment numbers and with the new additions to our CHSAA member schools. So that is boys 2A. For the sake of time, we'll quickly move down to girls 5A. Again, no real changes to what you saw in the boys. EMAC is dissolved, and you'll see those schools sprinkled throughout the other leagues. The only difference really that you'll see is that Fruita Monument boys are 4A, were placed down in the 4A. Their girls have remained 5A. So that's the only real change or difference you'll see in 5A boys and girls. Fruita Monument girls are 5A, their boys are 4A. 4A girls. So again, we spoke about Fruita Monument is 5A. So obviously that Southwestern League will look just a little bit different with 4 schools as opposed to 5, but they still have their auto qualifier there. Grand Junction Central is in 4A. They were placed down pretty similar there. Erie, you'll see Erie, Lutheran, Skyline. We spoke about them in the boys. The one difference there is you'll see in the Colorado League, in the girls, they do have 3 teams there, and we'll have an automatic qualifier in girls 4A. And boys, they have 3 schools in 5A, and they'll have the automatic qualifier in 5A, and they'll have an auto qualifier in girls for 4A, because Gateway girls were placed down into 4A. So other than that, no differences from the boys. Girls 3A, again, we spoke about it, Arvada, Inglewood, Fort Lupton into the Frontier League. We've added those schools that we spoke about, no difference from boys. We've got Eagle Ridge Academy and the Academy over into the Metro League. Denver, difference here, Denver has 3 schools in 3A girls. Abraham Lincoln, Regis Croft, and Denver West. They will qualify automatically into the postseason. That's really the only difference that we've got with girls 3A is that Denver's got some schools, additional schools that were placed down in 3A. Other than that, I think we look pretty similar. 2A will be a lot different. We have 53 schools in 2A girls. I think that's up from like 32, 36 maybe. somewhere around there this year. So we've added almost 20 schools into 2A. It's really shows the work, what we've done with 2A. And we added the classification, obviously, to grow the sport. We've done that. We've added new schools, we've added new teams. And so 2A is a robust classification, and just really excited about this new cycle. So you'll see Windsor Charter and the Vanguard Classical as our new members into CHSAA. Bishop, Matchbuff, Skyview are the new members into the Mile High East classification, and those are really the only additions that we've made into 2A, with some obviously changes around William Smith, Lotus, Attenborough Classical. Some addition, they've been placed down. Some of their numbers, their numbers put them in 2A. So you'll see those schools will now have an auto qualifier. St. Mary's in the Tri-Peaks League. Florence, 2A school now. They believe they were 3A previous. And so we've got some really exciting. Bruce Randolph, Jefferson, Sheridan now in the Frontier League will have an auto qualifier based on their numbers and being placed down into 2A. So really excited about adding some additional teams and some schools into 2A. Estes Park, Patriot League will qualify through the RPI, but they're a new addition to 2A. So again, we've got, yep. So we've got some great numbers in both 2A, 3A, 4A, and 5A classification. You're not going to see where you've got 60 schools, 65 schools in 4A and 31 in 2A. As you remember, we added teams into the postseason for 2A at our last committee meeting, and we did it for a reason. That was because we knew moving forward in this new cycle, we would be adding new schools and more teams into 2A. And so we did our job there, and we're excited about what these classifications will look like moving forward. Any questions?
Justin, you're amazing.
Yep. Not going to argue with you there. No.
Yep. No, I knew you wouldn't.
So that's what we've got. As Dan said, I mean, we're just really excited about the growth of the sport, where the sport's moving. I think this committee has done an amazing job trying to just sort of put the pieces in place for that growth, adding the 2A classification, moving forward with these new automatic qualifiers and seeding and playoff in 2A, adding the 2A playoff qualifiers. That we've just feel like we've seen moves happening 1-2 step ahead, and we've put ourselves in place so that when they do happen, we're ready and prepared for it. So really want to just commend this committee on the work they've done in helping to put soccer in a great spot. And that's all I've got, Dan.
Look at all these people. Anything further from anybody? I want to wish everybody a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I hope the end of this year treats you well. I'm on my way to Hawaii, visit my son, and so I am going to be in a lot warmer place. Actually, not really. It's raining.
Hopefully, yeah, you got to avoid that rain, right? Aren't they? It's like catastrophic. Yeah. Hopefully, yeah, you avoid that.
Yeah, I know, but he's stationed over at Pearl Harbor, so we're gonna do Christmas out there.
Oh, that'll be great.
Yeah.
We need a motion to.
Appreciate all you guys. Thank you for all that you bring to the table. This committee, as infrequently as we meet, I'm always inspired by the conversations and just the ideas about soccer to make it better for our state with this group. And so I am thankful to all of you. And we'll move forward and trudge on and kick COVID to the curb, hopefully someday.
All right, we just need a motion to adjourn then, Dan.
Yeah, let me get one.
I move to adjourn.
There we go.
Thanks, Mike.
I
We have a second. All right,
All right, everybody seconded it.
perfect. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate, like Dan said, have a great holiday, and we'll obviously share some of that information that we talked about with some of the wording around forfeits and the surveys on 2A and some of those things. We'll make sure to share that info with the committee as soon as we get it.
All right. Thanks, Justin.
Yep, thank you.
Whitney.
Thanks, guys.